that we have an opportunity here in Wales to do something completely different. And we could create a politics here that is nothing like that whatsoever.
So you don't believe in any immigration controls?
That's not what I said at all. There is an argument to have a sensible immigration policy.
Right.
But look, we've got a doctor shortage here in Wales.
Yeah.
We are crying out. In the Rhondda where I live, there are GPs retiring and absolutely no plan to replace them. 30% of our doctors in Wales were trained overseas. Our immigration problem here in Wales is that people are leaving the country. The young people are going to university and not coming back. The areas in the valleys that are becoming depopulated. Schools are closing because of falling roles. If our areas were more successful economically, people would want to come and live amongst us, and we should be welcoming to them.
All right, the woman at the back there. And somebody had their hand up here. Keep your hands up if you want to speak. And there was a woman there, that's right. So I'll go to you first, then I'll come to you. Yeah.
You said the students are not coming back to Wales. There's nothing to come back for.
That's the problem, exactly. That's exactly what
right.
So how would you go about encouraging
talking the
investment
country
to
down.
Wales?
Well, last week my party produced a plan for a National Infrastructure Commission for Wales, for example, which involves taking the opposite view to austerity and rather than closing down services, investing in our infrastructure, in our public services, in our broadband infrastructure. We've got a country that isn't connected north to south, for example, and we really do need to invest in those things that we missed out on when the times were good. The problem is now that money is short because of the banking bailout.
You in the third row. You in the third row there, yes.
I used to live and work in Spain, and when I spoke to Spanish people, they said that they felt that the UK wasn't welcoming to them. They wasn't welcome to people in the EU. So I wondered how the panel felt, that people abroad see us as a country that they don't want to live and work in and contribute as part of Europe.
I think that's
well,
terrible.
hold on.
Terrible.
Okay, Leanne. Alan Cairns, we must move on, but Alan Cairns, briefly on the suggestion that Leanne made that Theresa May could be leader of UKIP, and perhaps in that context, you comment on what the young woman there said.
Well, can I say that the message that came out of that referendum was that immigration needed to be controlled, and the first stage of controlling it is acknowledging it. And simply ignoring it, Leanne, doesn't mean it goes away. And Jeremy Corbyn last week completely failed to recognise the message that came from that referendum. And it's interesting that Leanne seems to be very open to immigration into the UK, but if it goes into Welsh-speaking communities, then she's got something very serious to say.
Okay, all right.
Hang on. He said something here now, and without anything to back it up. What are you talking about? Quote me. Give me anything that can back up what you just said.
I can absolutely say that when there's a migration into Welsh-speaking communities, that the integration in those communities, and I'm a passionate Welsh speaker, supporting those communities, isn't necessarily as it is. And many of your members have taken direct action in the past. Many have broken the law to that effect, and I would hope that you would condemn them, to, bearing in mind the standpoint that you're taking now.
Who are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Leanne,
what are you talking about?
You absolutely know that we can go to communities.
All right.
No, absolutely not. You and the audience will know as well that there are communities in Wales where there are nationalist activists that take direct action against people who come in. It wasn't so long ago.
Where?
It wasn't
when?
So long ago that some of the cottages were being burnt down. That direct action was banned.
Hang on, that is nothing to do with Plaid Cymru.
All right, the woman there. Go on,
that's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous.
A brief comment from you.
I live in Llangenach in Carmarthenshire. Plaid Cymru are eradicating English stream primary education throughout the whole of Carmarthenshire. What do you say about that? Do you say you're open to all immigration? Plaid Cymru are anti-English language at the moment, especially in Carmarthenshire.
I don't accept that, right? How can my party be anti-English language when the leader is an English language speaker? That would be perverse, wouldn't it?
Well, you don't speak Welsh.
I'm a learner. I'm not a fluent Welsh speaker. We have hundreds of thousands
is
of
Alan Cairns
members
a better Welsh speaker than you?
Yes, by a long chalk.
Oh, by a long chalk, right.
Yes.
But you're catching up.
Well, I mean, I'm a learner and I'm not
Okay.
fluent. So
Wait,
if what you were saying was correct, that would be like a form of self-harm, wouldn't it?
All right, let's go on. Let's go on. Now, we couldn't have that one outside later. Oh, no, I shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean to say it. I said the discussion can, the discussion can go on later. Brian Warlow, please.
The Prime Minister this week stated, "We are the party of workers." If true, where does this leave the Labour Party?
Yes, over and over again, the true Workers' Party, the party for ordinary working people, Mrs May said in her conference speech. Andy Parsons, what do you make of that?
Well, she was stood up, wasn't she, in front of her. The slogan was "a country that works for everyone," and then announced that she was bringing back grammar schools, something that conspicuously doesn't work for everyone. She then said that she was going to be the champion for the people that had defied the establishment, forgetting that she's been part of the establishment for decades and is arguably now the pinnacle of the establishment. She then went on to say, Britain should be a country, it doesn't matter where you were born. She obviously hadn't heard the speech from her own Home Secretary, her own Health Secretary, who was suggesting that we train up more junior doctors and then we could tell the foreign doctors who are helping us out at the moment that they should go away. She hadn't heard from her Liam Fox, who basically said that people who were here from the EU, he wasn't going to say that they could stay because they were a negotiating chip. They weren't people as such, they were a negotiating chip. Well, if I may continue, I've got a little bit more to do, if that's all right. The point about, what about Labour, yeah? The thing about Labour was that we'd already had from Philip Hammond, what's his economic policy. His economic policy, what was he going to do? He wants to say that he's going to get rid of the deficit, but he's not going to actually tell us now when he's going to get rid of it, but he will get rid of it. Now that sounds to me very similar to the policy that Ed Balls had before the last election. The challenge for Labour was always, could you actually get the people and the public to believe in what you had to say on the economy? Well, it seems they've convinced the Conservatives that that wasn't the worst economic policy at all.
You lost me there because I thought we were talking about whether the Tory party was the party of the workers.
Yeah, well, it was.
Now you're saying it's adopted Ed Balls' policy. Does that make them...
Well, if you're saying you were saying they were basically taking Labour's position
Yeah,
in the centre.
you were saying that, I thought.
Well, no, I believe
wasn't
that
saying anything.
That was part of the question. I thought that was part of the question.
Yeah. And
So-
you think that is happening?
So they have obviously tried to do that because they basically adopted Labour's economic policy from before the last election.
Oh, right. Alan Cairns.
I would say absolutely yes, we're the party of workers. In the first instance, I would say... well, I think we can recognise that unemployment in Wales, and this is something that we can celebrate because I won't talk Wales down, that unemployment in Wales is the lowest across the whole of the UK. It's at 4.1%, where it's 4.9% across the Wales. Exactly. Well, that's precisely the point of why we've invited a Labour advisor, former Labour advisor Matthew Taylor, to conduct an employment review, because we recognise working practices have changed. There's much more flexible working. There's so many more self-employed people. But those people aren't, if I can finish the point, those people aren't necessarily feeling the benefit of the economic growth. And as a result of that, that's why we want this review to be taking place, in order to respond to the needs and the demands and offer the same sorts of protections to those sorts of people over workers' rights and issues that many people in larger organisations get. So absolutely right, we are the party of workers.
Chukwumuna. I'll come to members of the audience in a second.
Before I actually answer the question, you've already commissioned an employment review which was done
Precisely
under
so.
Sajid Javid when he was a business secretary, and you haven't published it. So why are you commissioning someone else to do another one when you haven't even published the first one you commissioned?
Well, I hope you've noticed there's a change of Prime Minister in the interim, and therefore it's up to her to set her agenda. And she said on the steps of Downing Street...
happens with the last
she said on the steps of Downing Street, absolutely, that there are many people out there who don't feel that the economy is working for them, or that the country is working for them.
You're not answering my question.
There are people in this hall and across the country who struggle to pay the mortgage, who don't get the same security that you and I get, and that's what we're looking at.
The question was about workers' rights. And I'm sorry, this is a
The
complete...
question wasn't about workers' rights, it was
Workers,
whether the
workers,
Tories are the
workers.
party of workers.
Well,
yes.
clearly they're not, because they were the party that introduced employment tribunal fees which prevent workers from getting justice when they're treated unfairly at work. They also have made it harder for people to claim for unfair dismissal. They continually beat up on the organisations that represent working people, our trade unions, and now she wants to pose somehow as the great champion of workers and workers' rights. It's utterly ludicrous based on the last 5 to 6 years. So this whole thing, Tories, workers, I mean, there's a reason the audience were laughing.
Okay. Let's, before I go to the other two members of the panel, the woman there, you remember.
I just wondering how the Tories can actually turn around and say they're the party of workers after what they've done to not only the mining industry but the steel industry, etc. But also the thing that they're currently trying to do with the self-employed who are trying to claim working tax credit or universal credit as it's going to be now. They are making it so difficult for the self-employed who are just starting out on businesses. I have a friend of mine, she's been trying hard for 2 years to set up her own business, and the stress of it, trying to fill in all these tax credit forms, etc., all the time, which you have just made far more difficult. You just...
But no, David, but this exactly is why Matthew Taylor, a former Labour advisor, has been commissioned to look at these sorts of issues. Theresa May absolutely stands by this, and this is the sort of issues that people are complaining about, that Chucker has just highlighted, that we're seeking to resolve.
So much about workers' rights, why did you introduce employment tribunal fees? Why did you vote for that?
Do you agree with Matthew Taylor conducting this review on behalf of the government?
I think Matthew is a fantastic guy,
Well,
very, very capable, but you don't need him to tell you that what you've been doing has been fundamentally unfair. Denying people justice in employment tribunals, and you're now trying to tell us, you voted for that, you're now trying to tell everybody here that you care about their rights.
The man in the centre there.
Thank you. I would just say that do the Tories represent working people? Emphatically no. In my view, any credible party that calls the opposition party the nasty party, I think is below contempt. I worked all my life. I was proud at working. I had a good career. I don't consider and I'm a member of the Labour Party. I don't consider myself nasty, and I don't consider the Labour Party nasty. So certainly the Tories are not representing myself, and I think a lot of other people too.
All right. Leanne Wood.
Well, I think they're pretending to reach out to working class people to take advantage of the difficulties that the Labour Party, the infighting that has been going on within the Labour Party. I think there's an opportunistic attempt to try and take advantage of that. But what I would say to everybody, particularly everybody in Wales, is just don't believe them. Remember what they did to us in the 1980s. Remember the deliberate deindustrialisation of our communities, and we are still paying the price for that deliberate deindustrialisation today. Before I came into this job as a politician, I worked as a probation officer in the valleys, and I can tell you that some of the social problems that a deep-set second and third generation now that was started during the 1980s when those pits were deliberately closed, they should never be forgiven for that. Never.
So, Neil Hamilton, what do you make of the Prime Minister's claim that the Tories are the party of the workers?
Well, neither Labour nor the Tories are the party of working people. And Alan said, and as for Leanne now championing the coal industry, she wants to close down all the coal-fired power stations in the country and rely on windmills to generate electricity instead. So if it was left to Plaid Cymru, we would certainly never have had a coal industry in Wales. But Alan said that employment levels in Wales are higher than ever before, and that's true. But when you look at the income levels of people who are in work, they've never been lower in relative terms. 15 years ago, Wales was second from bottom in the league tables of income in the United Kingdom, English regions and the nations. Today, Wales is the bottom of the league. And we've had a Labour government in Wales for the last 20 years as well, and now a Tory government in the United Kingdom for the last 6 years. They've both failed the people of Wales and the United Kingdom in this respect. And of course the biggest losers from mass uncontrolled immigration have been those at the bottom of the income scale, people with the fewest skills. And so for many people the minimum wage has now become the maximum wage. And we in UKIP are the only party that's actually put forward a credible proposal for immigration control which would help those most at the bottom of the income scale. That is, I think, the real party of working people is UKIP.
There are number of hands up, and I'd just like to ask you to be brief, if you would, as I go round now. I've taken 2 or 3 people. You, sir, there, you've been waving away. Yes.
I must admit I'm actually appalled by Alan's comment that he's the party for the working class. I work in public services, I'm proud to work in public services, and your party are killing the NHS. Shame on you.
Okay, and that's the woman up there. The woman up there.
I work as a supply teacher through an agency. Supply teachers used to work through the council. The government, the Conservative government, have created a system where we only work through agencies now, and we used to have small perks like travel expenses, which have now been taken away from us because we're not officially self-employed, and yet all the politicians claim all the expenses under the sun.
All right, and the man in the pink shirt up there.
I can only speak from experience. I was in a thriving cosmetic industry up in the valleys, and when we needed the support, the only ones who were there, Plaid Cymru, Labour was speaking on TV and the Tories were nowhere to be seen. And it's all about when we need the support, that says it all.
All right.
They weren't there.
And you in the front here, can you reach the microphone, get to you? Yes.
How can the Conservatives say that they are the party for the working people when they have accelerated the state pension age faster than they needed to, and they have denied women born in the 1950s their state pension until age 66?
Okay.
That's the case.
And you, sir, I would come to you, but you agree with her. And you, sir, with the beard. Yeah, with the beard too. Yes.
Thank you, David. I'd just like to
Be
say.
brief, if you would.
I would. I'll certainly be brief. Alan, I heard you said you were a proud Welshman and proud to speak Welsh. Can you tell me how many of your cabinet are working class?
I think the majority probably would have come from that sort of background.
They're all Etonians.
Well, I'm not. I mean, I went to school just up the road, and my father was a welder in the steelworks. So, I mean, I know many of the people here.
A lot of the old Etonians have left, haven't they? Because they changed the Prime Minister, remember?
Well, they still, you know, I'm very surprised at how Alan can say they're the party of Wales. Just going on to what some of the people said in here about public services, we've seen a demise of all our public services, and not just through the Welsh. I know what you're going to say, Alan, you're going to pass it on to somebody else, but it started with Thatcher. And whether you like it or not, it's a decline of what happened in Wales.
Well,
Leanne Wood is right on that.
Thank you very much. We've heard a good deal about Welsh matters here, because we're in Neath. Not surprising, why shouldn't we? But I just want to go on to a completely different topic. I'm sorry, sir, but I want to go on to a completely different topic with a question from Mark Palmer, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer.
I'd like to ask, is it time for the West to accept it can only end the war in Syria by joining forces with Russia and accepting President Assad as a necessary evil?
Joining with Russia and accepting Assad. Neil Hamilton.
I think it's very dangerous for Western countries to blunder into other countries whose internal politics they don't understand and which ultimately they can't control. We know the catastrophe of the Iraq war, of the intervention in Afghanistan. Western intervention has only made things far, far, far worse, not just for those countries themselves, but also through the exported terrorism, which is the inevitable consequence. So I think the answer to the question is yes, actually. President Assad isn't a very nice person, very obviously, but you can't see these things in a moral vacuum. You've got to ask yourselves, what is the alternative? Is it going to be better or worse? And I don't think that there's any of the interventions from Libya across to Afghanistan that the West, with their grandstanding politicians who like to strut on the world stage and to expose for public view what they think is their moral superiority, have done an ounce of good, actually, for the people of those countries themselves. When we look at the horror of Aleppo today, can we really say that Western intervention in Syria has actually benefited the Syrian people. There may not be a solution to these problems. Many problems in the world don't have an answer. But what I do know is that what the West can do is not make things worse by blundering in and doing what they can't and making things worse because they have no idea actually what's going to follow. In Iraq, we had no follow-through plan. Right. In Afghanistan, we were unable to make any difference, and so we've ended up just making things worse.
All right. You start there.
In that case, Mr. Hamilton, do you believe that we should continue bombing women and children?
No,
the Russians?
I don't believe we should be bombing women.
But you've just said that you agree that we should perhaps get into cahoots with Russians.
No,
that was the question, joining forces with Russia and accepting President Assad.
But that's what you've just agreed to.
I don't think we should be involved.
That's what you've just agreed to.
No, that's it.
All right, Alan Cairns.
Well,
you voted in favour of bombing Assad, didn't you, when it came to the vote?
I voted in favour of taking action in Syria, yes, in terms of supporting the people against Daesh and the horrors that Daesh would bring about. But I think for me, at the moment, and the immediate priority has got to be the humanitarian crisis and the action that we need to take in terms of supporting those in Aleppo. Only earlier this week, the last hospital was bombed tragically in Aleppo. We've seen terrible photographs of children who've lost their parents and families and children who've been orphaned as a result. So I think the starting point has got to be to carry on carry on talking in order to get to that US-Russian type ceasefire again, so that we can get some humanitarian aid. We've got a proud record in supporting some of the most challenged countries in terms of who are facing war and conflict, and this is a good reason why I absolutely stand by our overseas aid budget in order to support those communities and those people who absolutely need it now.
Yes, sir.
I just can't understand why the UN really join together and put armed forces actually into Syria and clear it all up, because all this bombing is causing lots of deaths by individuals, innocent individuals and youngsters. And I think there should be a plan to go in there by arms to actually clear it and put the state back to where it was.
And do you think that would be effective? That they
far more effective than actually the constant bombing and killing of innocent people.
The woman here in the front.
Well, I think it's tragic the way we see on television the bombing of the hospitals and everything. I mean, years ago we helped Ethiopia and all those other places. Look at Northern Ireland. We had to talk to finish the Northern Ireland conflict. There had to be talks, and I think there are going to have to be whoever talks and whatever. I don't believe we should go into Syria, because look at Iraq. Look at all the other places that we've been into, and look at them now. But I think we should definitely be talking, no matter what Assad is, and no matter what Putin is. They seem to have the power together. Some people think that they're in cahoots. Well, let's stop this terrible tragedy that's going on. And when you see the pictures on television, I'm sure everybody's heart is breaking. It's awful.
Mark Palmer asked the question. Do you agree with what she's saying? What would you like to see happen?
Obviously, I'd like to see the war end, but I think unless we accept the reality that if we don't talk to Russia and we don't talk to Assad, then our current policies, they've been playing out for 5.5 years. Are we prepared to have another 5.5 years of not talking, watching more hospitals blown up?
Andy Parsons.
Well, our policy towards Syria has been sort of, it's not been well thought through, is it? David Cameron wanted to get the bombing in 2013, he didn't succeed with that vote. He then wanted to get the bombing in 2015, he succeeded with that vote. The only difference between those two votes was actually, in those 2 years, he actually wanted to bomb completely the different side from 2013 to the one he wanted to bomb in 2015. That doesn't seem like a particularly coherent foreign policy. We've got, obviously, the global players supporting different sides, and in terms of what we need to do, yes, we've got to talk. But what can we actually do with at the moment, well, one thing we can do is there are a lot of Syrian refugee kids who are currently in Calais with links to British families, and we're keeping them behind that wall. Now, one thing we should definitely do is get them into this country and help them now.
Lisa.
Thank you.